Origin Chardonnay. So a couple of things to kind of set your mind and your palate before you take your first sip. So unoaked Chardonnay. So no big oaky flavors, a crisper finish. And so as long as you're not expecting big buttery, you won't be shocked by this one.
You're not going to be disappointed about that.
I think it'll go great with the seafood, great with the cheese as well. So one additional thing that we do that we wouldn't do in person is we have some videos. So we have some videos of Bob Cabral, director of winemaking, talking about this wine specifically. So if you have that in your glass, I'll cue that up, and we can see what Bob has to say about it. So things to watch out for in this one, around halfway through, it's 2 minutes long. He'll talk about the big concrete eggs. So this is finished 70% in concrete eggs, 30% in stainless steel.
And what does that do differently? Pardon my interruption. What does that do differently, concrete versus stainless?
So a couple of things. The concrete is probably closest to a neutral oak barrel than anything else. So even though it's, I think people would associate it more with a stainless steel tank, it's breathable. So, some air gets in, which makes it a little bit more like that barrel. It doesn't really impart much flavor to the wine, maybe a little bit of minerality, but it's limited. So that's number one. Number two is the shape of it is very intentional. So with that egg shape, as the wine ferments and releases gas, it basically creates this stirring effect for the wine on its own. So kind of self-stirring as it's fermenting, which you'll see on the wine. For an unoaked Chardonnay, it's I think kind of a little bit thicker and richer than other unoaked Chardonnays that I've had. This one kind of messes with my mind. It's one where it smells mostly like a Chardonnay to me. Up front on the palate, it tastes like a Chardonnay, but then it finishes like a Sauvignon Blanc maybe, or something that I'm more accustomed to not seeing oak. And so it's just a really interesting and different wine, and one that it's a treat for me. We made it part of the virtual tastings for the spring. This is a wine that we don't pour at the Adobe. It usually just goes straight to club, and that's it.
Tasting Chardonnays out of the valley. I've come across it a while.
And this seems like, to me, this seems like, well, like a low acid Sauvignon Blanc, or I don't know. It seems like a more neutral tasting wine. That's not wine.
Doesn't have that irony taste that,
So let me cue up the video with Bob.
Back to the palate.
Let's see what he has to say.
The Origin Chardonnay was conceived out of taking some of the best lots of grapes from our Durrell vineyard and creating a wine that showed the true expression of the site itself. And what I mean by that is kind of eliminating some of those tricks and some of those manipulations that a winemaker can put on to the wines to, craft them in kind of their signature or their vision. So the Origin Chardonnay was conceived by whole cluster pressing the same lots of Chardonnay, older Winty clones on the Durrell Ranch, into a tank, splitting those lots in half. Half would go to barrel ferment for our Durrell vineyard, single vineyard Chardonnay. The other half would go into concrete eggs. And these are large ceramic type vessels made of concrete that hold about 170 gallons of juice. And what you really see with this wine, we happen to have a glass right here, is a real rich style Chardonnay that has all of that mouthfeel and texture and the aromas of pears and apples and stone fruits without the influence of oak. And not that we don't like oak, but just to give our consumers something different so you can kind of see what the vineyard would truly taste like without the influence of oak. This wine has a real nice mouthfeel and body to it, a little bit crisper. And I think a lot of our consumers are really surprised by the richness and the flavor of this Chardonnay, even though there isn't any oak in it.
Well, to me, be quiet. This, I don't know, this kind of reminds me of some kind of Bordeaux wine or something.
Yep,
Yeah,
I'd agree.
Oh, it's different.
Yeah, it's very European tasting, yeah.
Dry, very good.
And so this one is really interesting. The 2018 is only the third year that we've made it. So Price Family Estates Pinot Noir. The idea behind the wine is, over the last 23 years, Bill has acquired a pretty incredible portfolio of vineyards. What could we make as essentially an expression of the vintage from those vineyards? So Conrad, you mentioned a map before. If you have that, I'm showing it on the screen too. So what this wine is exactly that. It's our winemaking team's attempt not to make the same wine year over year, but to taste through all of the different lots from each vineyard. So I think it's 53 lots in total, and create a blend that, in their opinion, represents, in this case, what 2018 really the dominant flavors from that vintage for that. So, so in the wine, Wallala is probably the backbone of it for 2018. About 35% of the wine comes from the Wallala vineyard. So way up near the Mendocino County line, a remote ridge top vineyard. Basically have to take logging roads to get out to it. It's surrounded by trees on each side and just kind of runs along the spine of this mountain. It's really a beautiful spot. And kind of true Sonoma coast, cool, doesn't get quite as ripe as some of the Russian River fruit does, but adds a nice baseline to the wine for us. If I scroll down to Russian River, this is Green Valley of Russian River, if you're familiar with that. So kind of this sub-appellation within the Russian River AVA. And so it's this cooler kind of circular pocket. And we have two vineyards there, Alana and William James. Those are Bill's two children. These are both small, and they're younger vineyards too. William James, I think the first vintage we made, the first vintage we made was 2017. By the way, the 2018 William James, phenomenal. It is flying off the shelves. My favorite wine out of the fall release.
Oh, Greg, what we are tasting along with this unbelievable smelling wine.
Yeah, it smells good. I haven't tasted it
good.
yet.
I'm still stuck in the slide.
Crostini with
I would be if I hadn't finished
and tomato cherry jam. And the wine or the cheese is Saint Angel Triple Crown.
Oh, very nice. So for these two Russian River vineyards, about 5% from each one. So we have a Russian River blend that sees more of that fruit. And then, like I mentioned, we have single vineyards from the William James and then the Alana Cuvée, which comes out in the spring. It's a little extra barrel aging. I've heard it's amazing. Second biggest contributor to what's in your glass is Gap's Crown, one of the more famous Pinot Noir vineyards in Sonoma County. And so that makes up about 30% of what's in the blend in 2018. And then Durrell, we talked about, this makes up about 10% of it, about 3 miles west of downtown Sonoma. And then the last one, One Sky, one of the better vineyards you've probably never heard of. This goes into our flagship cuvee, Eva Marie. Eva Marie is Bill's wife, so the wine better be good. It's about 1,400 feet up on Sonoma Mountain, beautiful site, and really good fruit. We make a Chardonnay from here too, which is, if you like a little bit more of the Kistler style, this is probably the closest one to Kistler in terms of style, and a bigger and butterier. And that's it. So again, there's no recipe for this. It changes year to year, but in the 18, that's kind of how everything breaks down.
Wow, this is perfect with the
It is
wine.
Price Family Vineyards and Wine Estates is a collection of specific vineyard sites and wineries within Sonoma County. The first vineyard of the collection was Durrell, purchased in 1997 by Bill Price. And subsequent purchases have included Wallala out on the Sonoma coast, the Alana Vineyard, a very special vineyard out in the Russian River Valley, and Gap's Crown on the Sonoma coast. We looked at our portfolio of wines, and it came during a blending session with Bill. We talked about how do we capture really what Price Family Vineyards is all about, and how do we take the spirit of each of these sites, the uniqueness of these sites, and kind of put it into one glass of wine. And that's how we came up with Price Family Vineyards Pinot Noir bottling, were to take what we really liked about those individual sites and try to get those to come through in the glass. From the people working the vineyards, to the people filling barrels, to the folks working on the bottling line. So that it encompasses that community element of what Price Family Vineyards and Wine Estates really is all about. You know, I've said over the last almost 40 years of making wine and working in vineyards that I've really never made a great bottle of wine by myself. And I can say that that was no more true than it was when the team was assembled, along with Ryan and Ashley, Hector, who had done almost 10 vintages prior to that. We came together to craft some wines that I think are just spectacular. And I'm really excited for the fans of Three Sticks to taste some of these new wines.
Thing also. So what are the fall releases, and can you tell us about that a little
Yeah. So we have 6 new wines that just came out on Monday, actually. So 2 Chardonnays, the oaked version of the Durrell Chardonnay. So we had Origin unoaked. This is the 2018, the oaked version of that. We have the Chardonnay from the Alana Vineyard, which is really interesting. So it's a little bit frizzante, like it almost tastes, it's like borderline carbonated. It's not, but there's some
Yeah.
like higher levels of dissolved CO2 in it. So it's refreshing and it's complex. Like I bought a bunch because
I like that too, I think, yeah.
I tried it and I loved it. And then 4 single vineyard Pinots. So most of the ones that we talked about. So Wallala way up north, the Durrell Vineyard Pinot, Gap's Crown Pinot, and William James.
So in your mind, is there like a clear winner of those 4?
The William James I really love this year. And I mean, the winemaking team tried it in January, and Bob, who's gotten 100 points, he goes, this could be a 100-point wine. Like I don't want to oversell it, because then you try it and be like, oh, this is really good, but it's not 100 points. It's great. And one of those where we tried them all, and all the wines are really good, but it kind of stood out for me as being my clear favorite. But different things than the other wines. Like Durrell is rich. It's almost got like a caramely nose, which is pretty interesting, and not something that we usually get on our Pinots. So it's mostly barrel for that, but it's but really delicious from that standpoint. I think the Gap's Crown is going to be really great too. It's big, and it's a little bit tight, and it's a little bit young. And Wallala is kind of the house favorite among the tasting room staff. And I think it was my 4th favorite this year, which is unheard of. You know, it's usually number 1, and that's not a knock on Wallala. It's more kind of a commentary on how good everything came out in 18.
Oh, that's good. Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
How important do, like you were referring to ratings, like 100-point wine and that kind of thing. So how important do you all strive for that and try to make wines in a certain style so it will get the points? Or like, is there controversy? Like, take us inside the whole point thing.
Yeah, definitely doesn't impact how we make the wines. You know, I think you've seen a little bit of that kind of on the Napa Cabernet side, people trying to make wines particularly to fit Robert Parker's palate before he retired.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, my opinion on it is I don't put a ton of stock in it, other than to say that particularly if you get kind of in that 95 to 100 range, the wine might not be for you, but you'll probably have it and go, okay, it's a well-made wine and there's something kind of unique about this. But there are a lot of people rating wines, and we'll have wines that, you know, get a 98 and get an 89, you know, in the same year. And that's kind of the clearest indicator of just like, what's going on? You know, there's no real, there's no real measure to it. The only good way to do it is just, for me, it's at least a general indicator of, all right, if 10 different people rated this and they all rated it 95 plus, it's probably pretty good. But for me, I'd rather try it and make up my own mind.